First of all, thank you, Robin. That was an amazing guided Reiki journey meditation for both for solstice, but also for healing listening. As Robin said earlier, that this month we've been focusing on the topic of listening skills with Reiki. And we use both expanding your listening and also expanding your perceptions and your inner awareness as well as your outer awareness. And so one of the things that, 2 weeks ago, we talked about not having been heard in our life and the effect of that. Also, then the following week, in listening to others, the effect of being a poor listener and also the effect on others when we are not good listeners to others, and how important that ability is. And I talked a lot about the freedom that that gave me, is learning to listen well. When I started with Reiki, I had no idea that this was one of the core foundational both skills that we develop, but also the gift we receive with Reiki energy. And I think because in my life, particularly in childhood, I would say that I didn't have a great opportunity to be heard, although not as bad as many. So put me somewhere in the middle of that. And a very, very authoritarian father, which was common in my generation also. And so it wasn't something that I was aware of that it affected me until I started to work with both my shamanic practices and my Reiki practices. And how what I know now that I didn't know when I started all of it in 1997 was that ultimately what I was trying to find was myself. And I originally thought I was seeking God, and of course that's all part of it, and trying to find my place from moving out of not necessarily religious, but spiritual, and what that looked like and what that meant and how did I find it. Because also in that journey, I realized that a lot of what I was looking for was how to find my own inner authority, because I had learned my spirituality through an outside authority. And I really had this yearning inside that I know, most of us here, that's that tapping we hear inside that's motivating us, inspiring us to find some pathway that gives us access to our own inner knowing. And so what I learned with it is if my mind is super busy all the time, which it is, and I'm not trying to change that. I learned that I used to think that, everything was be still. It's like, I'm not very good at being still. It's not my strong point. And so what I learned is what that actually meant was stillness for me did not look the way I thought it meant. I thought it meant that I needed to sit, which I did hours and years of meditation and stillness and listening. But I also learned that I could have the stillness within during my busyness. And I often talk about Reiki on the fly to help with that. Ultimately, what I learned was that Reiki, the energy itself, helped me to be able to hear myself. And that part of listening, when I think of being unheard, well, what it's like to be unheard by your own self. It's not always about being unheard by others, but what if you're unheard by yourself, from yourself? So some of the challenges that can bring when you don't hear yourself is a lack of self-awareness. Sometimes it's hard to hear through the noise of the external expectations that we have taken on for ourselves, or even external opinions that we have taken on as our own. That ultimately, when we go in and listen deeper, we actually have a different truth inside of us about our external expectations. What are our own internal? What do we really think about our own opinions? What do we really think about, what's going on in the external world, aside from the streams of thought that we walk in constantly, those thought forms that physically exist of everybody else's thoughts? And how do we discern it? Not being able to listen to yourself can lead to poor decision making, can make it hard to know what decision, conscious choices that you want to make. Sometimes it leads to emotional overload, like just so much coming in because you can't hear yourself. It's like hearing the forest through the trees, or the tree through the forest, whatever that saying is. It also can disconnect us from our own intuition. Because how do you hear your intuition? And I know for myself, oftentimes some of those things I know more about in retrospect than I do in the moment. And I'm disconnected from my intuition, or even if I think I'm listening to my intuition, a lot of times I can look back and either look at it in retrospect and go, oh, look at that. I'm so glad I followed my intuition. So glad I was listening to myself. I'm so glad I heard my own gut feeling. And then other times it's like, darn it, I should have listened to that gut feeling. So that happens too. Can lead to stress, chronic stress. I had a really good one today. I'm presenting at the Omega Institute Wisdom of Reiki conference about animal Reiki, and I was getting really stressed about it. And I mean, I've done years of this. We wrote the manual, we wrote the topic. I've done years of presentations. I'm very comfortable public speaking. And I noticed myself getting really stressed. And then when I went in and I was listening to myself, I heard something I heard about that years ago. It's not about me. I'm only there to help people know more about animal Reiki and how to practice it using their Reiki energy, because everybody there is from all different lineages. And all of a sudden I went, oh, that's right. That's a teaching I received years ago when I was going to a Reiki retreat, and I was presenting the gratitude ceremony, which that came about because I learned about listening to the opinions about from others, that when I went into gratitude, it helped. But anyway, I was presenting it at the Reiki retreat, and it was a really big one, and people from all around the world, and it was my first time, and I was super nervous and getting kind of sick to my stomach from it, and praying for that to stop. Like, could I just be comfortable about this? And I was out drumming under the moon at the retreat and praying for this, and I heard the words, it's not about you. It's about presenting or providing gratitude for the people. So there's another example of just something, a tool and a teaching that Reiki gave me in that moment, that was probably 15 years ago, that then applied to today. And I could hear it because I took the time this morning to think, why am I getting stressed about this? I'm completely comfortable in this type of a setting. So it can add to stress, like, just unrelated stress when you can't hear yourself because you can't hear yourself think or make decisions, or you feel overloaded. It can give you self-doubt when you're not listening to yourself. So there can be a misalignment. So now let's go to, though, how Reiki actually can help us when we activate Reiki, whether you're using self Reiki, whether you're doing Reiki on the fly, whether you're receiving Reiki from others. The energy itself entrains your life force to that higher frequency of consciousness. It will lift you into another level of thinking. It's actually very specifically what Usui Sensei was inviting when he received Reiki on Mount Karama. He was asking for the energy of enlightenment that gave him perfect peace on Shinditsume, gave him perfect peace in all situations. That's that ability to hear yourself. So when you invite Reiki, it gives you actually increased self-awareness. Sometimes it's that discernment, like just helping you discern, what is this, where am I, and what are my solutions? Reiki is very solution-oriented. It's very communication-oriented. It's also very practical. It's applied spirituality. So it's not only about your spiritual experiences, but it's also about your practical everyday priorities, decision making, emotional balance. We started in this group back with the pandemic, April of 2020, and developed the mantra and followed the mantra of stay stable, be kind. Just that emotional balance, that listening to yourself. And so often I would just stop and think, that's right. Go within, take a moment, take a breath, stay stable, be kind. So it reduces your stress. It increases your self-confidence. It provides you with healing and self-growth because it can heal past traumas and unresolved emotions of not having been heard, or also because in this group, we are often very empathic. We can also pick up on other people's emotions that get stuck within us. Well, when you're listening to yourself and you're letting Reiki come in and do this work for you, it can actually lift those from you for you and also create a filter. So all that outside noise that comes in with our empathy can actually be filtered. So I actually use Reiki all the way around me every day, all the time, whether I do that physically or whether I am just on the fly, dropping Reiki and putting that filter around me, aware it's different than like a shield, because it's really allowing the energy to take any external sources and filter them so that by the time anything reaches you, you're actually hearing you and you have another level of discernment. Positive self-talk, it can also help you with that, the awareness that your life is aligning. You are making choices to align. You are making choices to listen to yourself. I often talk about it with Reiki in Reiki classes, that is one of the biggest gifts of Reiki, is that alignment when you can hear your own inner truth, you can perceive it, you expand your perceptions And with your empathy, for instance, you can use your empathy to lift to higher frequencies of what's going on in the external world. Go into those higher frequencies, allow those filters to help you, and use that discernment about what is true for you, what you need for you. Often, I had a session not too long ago when it was about, being self-focused. And often we think that is selfish. And there's a difference of being selfish and being self-focused. And so allowing yourself to take the time to focus on you and what matters to you and how you hear yourself. The main symbols that I use, I use all the symbols for it because it's so varied. A lot of the reasons why I'm listening or not listening, but really that mental emotional symbol, SHK, that for me is a significant symbol for my ability to hear me, discernment, and my decision making, clarity of mind, clarity of my intuition, clarity of imagination. Another big piece where we often have been taught not to listen or hear our own imagination. Same thing with our instincts and our inner awareness. And Reiki naturally entrains you and your consciousness, your human mind, your human nature, your personality, your day-to-day. It naturally aligns you with a different level of thinking, a different level of hearing yourself, kind of, weeds through all the outside stuff. And sometimes it takes, a few breaths. Sometimes you can do things like, Robin just did the guided Reiki meditation. You can go back to YouTube or a podcast and listen to those, or you can do them for yourself. You can do self-Reiki. You can receive Reiki from others. Sometimes I do Reiki in motion where I'm wandering and wondering and just asking Reiki to help while I wander my neighborhood and look at all the animals and the trees and the plants and my, everything that is here. And that helps me listen to myself. So you find the methods that work best for you, but also adding Reiki to do it. So I'm aware of the time. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up with this topic, but again, using Reiki for that. And just if it's something that you're still trying to learn about, and I will tell you this is ongoing for me, is actually asking with that intention of Reiki, help me to hear myself, my own inner truth, with my own inner awareness. And then always add in gentle and for your best benefit.